So welcome everyone to the Sustainable Media Center Working Group. I'm Stephen Rosenbaum. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Sustainable Media Center. And today's subject is AI and the impact it is having on disinformation. Now, to sharpen that focus, we've titled today's gathering Artificial Intelligence and the Future of Truth. And we bring with us Dr. Daniel Rogers, who is the co-founder of the Global Disinformation Index. Danny's been an advisory board member almost from the start, and he lives and breathes the fast-moving world of disinformation. So we start by asking Danny to just begin with a launch about the organization and the state of AI and its impact on disinfo. Then we'll open it to a freewheeling conversation for the balance of the hour, because everyone here brings their own experience, their own questions to this important area. Danny, welcome and take it away.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for joining. I can give you a quick background. So I'm a physicist by training, which is a weird thing to be in this space. Background and started a couple of cybersecurity companies, and then most recently started this nonprofit called the Global Disinformation Index. So what my nonprofit does very quickly is catalyzing change throughout the tech industry by risk rating the open web for disinformation risk. We do kind of that core indexing work, we do intelligence work, we do policy work. And my job is mostly around kind of innovation and kind of cutting edge, whether that's platforms, technologies, policy, innovations, et cetera. So, I think it's a really interesting topic and a really interesting time right now to be talking about these technological innovations. Oh, and I also skipped over, I teach a class on disinformation and narrative warfare at NYU's Center for Global Affairs. We talk a lot about this stuff, about AI, generative AI, and things like that. So maybe I should start by just kind of defining what we're talking about. So one of my challenges is I'm a bit of a technologist in that, I am really intrigued and pay attention to like the math of what we're talking about here. And I tend to sort of try not to pay too much attention to the marketing speak around what it is. And so I don't actually like the moniker AI anyway, because the truth is there isn't really like anything intelligent about it. I think the intelligence part of it is mostly kind of like marketing speak, like techno optimism, like venture capitalist excitement, more than it is actually like technically accurate. What these systems are statistical sort of statistical mimicry systems. So they have no context about facts or about objects or what they're mimicking. They're measuring statistics of certain sets of data, and then either classifying things or providing like outputs of statistical models. And so what we're talking about today, I think, is a lot about what this world of generative AI. Generative AI is taking this idea of statistical models that classify things, feeding them randomized inputs until they decide that something looks statistically like the model they're programmed to classify. So, a generative, these new like DALL-E 2s and things like that, where you say, show me a picture of a dog. What it's doing is it has a classifier that classifies images of dogs. It's been trained on millions of pictures of dogs crawled from around the internet. And it then generates literally random images, like it's starting with random pixels. It's adjusting the pixels one by one, millions and millions of times, until an image appears that it classifies as a dog. And then it shows that to you. It says, here, I made this random picture that my classifier says statistically looks like all these other pictures that you trained me on. Here's what you asked me to produce. And whether that's a picture of a dog from DALL-E 2 or the answer to some question in the chat GPT, chatbot, it's all doing that basic same mechanics. And so I just want to kind of start there. Like there's, a generative AI has no idea what a dog is. There's no concept of what facts are. It's just generating pictures or sequences of words that pass sets of classifiers that humans have trained them on. I kind of want to start there, or pause there and just like set that as the definitional framework. And then I'm happy to kind of, dig into any one area. I mean, how this relates to disinformation, more about the technology. Like, you all tell me where you'd like to focus today.
I'll start with a question.
Sure.
Because I know you're a good storyteller in addition to being a good technologist. We're 2 years away from the presidential election. So in those 24 months, imagine not a government, not a great big tech operation, but some crafty bad actor with their hands now on these new sets of tools. Like, what would someone do with Chat GPT that could make the world of US politics dramatically different in 24 months?
Okay, so that's a really good starting point. So let me before I even kind of get to the specifics of like what are people going to do, like let me talk a little bit about like technology versus like use of technology, right? Like, technology itself is fundamentally neutral, right? Like, and I know this is sort of I want to pick an example. I'm trying not to pick like guns, right? Because like obviously like there are too many guns, but then again, like giving more guns to Ukraine is a good thing, right? So like, but even this technology, right? Let me give you a closer to home story, right? I have a 3-year-old toddler, and she came to me one morning while I was getting her ready for school, and she said, "Daddy, I want to FaceTime Elmo." And, I had this epiphany. I was like, holy crap, like with generative AI technology, I could literally like code you up an app that you could FaceTime with Elmo. And I like talked to Hani Farid at Berkeley, who's one of the world's experts in this. And we had like this whole conversation. And I'm like, I was ready to like, jump ship and start calling venture capitalists and raise money for our Let's FaceTime with Elmo startup. And then like I talked to my partner about it, and we talked about it for a couple of days, and we realized, like, do we really want our 3-year-old FaceTiming with Elmo? Like how do we feel about, breaking down that sense of reality further? Like there, it's the technology is the technology, and it's really like comes down to the choices people make about using the technology and anticipating the harms that it's caused. And ChatGPT is a great example of that, because it's literally been a topic of conversation in the tech industry for years now. So ChatGPT is not a particularly innovative thing on its own. It is merely the same kinds of statistical models and training sets that all the other big tech companies have. Google has had the same technology for many years and has just chosen not to release it because of all of the things that you could do with it that would continue to fill the internet with awfulness. But
get to the bad actor, because around this table there are people that will have different points of view on this. It'll trigger a conversation. But
here's what I think in terms of like the problem with this technology, right? Because it's not what is specifically somebody going to do with Chat GPT, because I don't think someone's going to like do a Chat GPT attack on the presidential election. I mean, I think people might try to do deep fakes, and there have been shallow fake videos, right? Like of Nancy Pelosi drunk, which was really just like a video of Nancy Pelosi slowed down. I think the problem with all of this is that it creates an information environment where like it just furthers us down the kind of post-truth rabbit hole. So it's not that someone's going to gen up a fake video of Biden doing something. It's that all the real videos of Trump doing something that we don't that is embarrassing, he can just wave away and say that's a deep fake now. They don't have to be deep fake. They don't have to use that to the technology. The fact that the technology becomes ubiquitous means that the concept of truth no longer matters. And I read an article by Matt Ferrero, who's a lawyer at WilmerHale, who writes a lot about deepfake laws. And he said, what happens now in criminal cases when the prosecution puts up surveillance video and the defendant says, yeah, that's faked, it's deep faked, and tells the jury, like, look at all these ways we can fake video now. Clearly it wasn't me robbing the bank. Someone deep faked my face onto this. So it's like, you don't even need the technology. It's just the liar's dividend from knowing the technology exists that I think is the really scary thing.
Hey,
so let's pause there.
Daniel,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time making movies, right? And
Right.
so 2 years ago, Google asked me to come up and be part of a roundtable about could AI write movie scripts, right? And the problem for me was that assumes that all the original ideas that ever have existed in the universe are already out there,
Right.
in movie scripts.
100%.
And that all you have to do is mimic the best ones and regurgitate them into, a formula. And now the biggest problem in the movie business today is that there's all the big movies are just formulas, right? I mean,
they're the worst are all sequels. Like everything is a sequel or a prequel.
Right, exactly.
All the top movies were the sequels to the old movies. Yeah.
But literally, I have a friend up the street who writes movies for Marvel, and they have a map,
right,
a formula to which, by minute 26, yeah, this thing has to happen. By minute 42, this has, it's
right.
it's math. So all this would do would make more crap than we already have. The only thing that makes movies great is originality. And this just assumes that all the knowledge that ever existed is already out there on the internet.
Right.
And it seems to me the whole idea of generative AI is absurd because it is, it assumes all the great art has already been made, all the great movies have already been made, it's all done. And all we have to do is somehow recombine the assets to make something quote unquote new.
Yeah, the mass homogenization. I'll just interject one thing, and then is that I think the only thing that there's been like successfully written by AI is car commercials because they are so incredibly formulaic. Like I think they've success. I think you could write car commercials by AI, but
Jim, go ahead.
I would like to believe that what you just said, Jonathan, is the case. I've been experimenting with ChatGPT from the moment it came out to try to find a way to agree with you. And I want to. What I've been finding is incredible originality. It's, as was pointed out, it's not intelligent originality, but it is prompting in its ignorance, in its total unawareness of what would be formulaic or not. And when things are formulaic, they obviously appear to be formulaic, but every once in a while, and I've been finding more than my intelligent creative friends, and certainly more rapidly, in its ignorance, it throws out an absurd idea that opens the door to originality more often. So if we want, I haven't heard anyone say anything extremely complicated, like a full movie script is going to be generated, approved as is, and made into a film. But if you're sitting around as a screenwriter and you're trying to come up with an original idea, you're going to use this to throw out some weird stuff every once in a while, more rapidly probably than you do. That's going to give you the spark. That's going to turn into something. And that to me is a game changer, and ripple that through every field. And the idea that it's algorithmic strength is not going to generate originality indirectly, I think is a mistake.
I'm just going to point this in. Hold on 1 second. I want to stay away from creative for this conversation because it's a different space. I want to propose this. You're now in the Pentagon, right? And there are X number of people working on PSYOPs, and they're developing ways to attack Vladimir Putin with some versions of deep fakes. Are there 3 people in a basement office, or is it 3,000 people, or is it how many? Like, how big an effort is the U.S. government using today to develop effective digital weapons to essentially end the war in Ukraine by manufacturing something horrific and untrue.
But that's not how it's going. I mean, with I spent 6 years in the intelligence community, and so I will tell you I have no guilty knowledge, but I can tell you just with my knowledge of how the world works, like that is not what the government is putting 3,000 people on, is like, how do we generate a deep fake to end the war in Ukraine? Because that is what the Russians are trying to do right now, and they've tried it, right? They've impersonated mayors of cities in Ukraine. They've done all kinds of deep fake shenanigans, which we've debunked, which we've done forensics on and pointed out, like, here we know that this is not what they purport it to be. And that's a version of narrative control, right? Is getting out ahead of these things and pointing out when. I mean, that's what we did leading up to the invasion, right? We told everyone, here's what they're going to do next. They're going to put out a propaganda video with a fake false flag attack and et cetera, and was maintained narrative control the entire time. The Pentagon does not need to, fake a speech by Putin to end this, to convince hearts and minds to ally with the Ukrainians. Like, so I tell you, that is undoubtedly not happening. What they're putting 3,000 people on is rapid response capability to call out when the Russian side does that. And I think that's why, like, I'm less concerned about those scenarios. While they're very real, those are already getting the attention that they need. The sort of like fake Kim Jong-un video, or the fake video declaring war on North Korea, et cetera, like all those things, like, that is not that, like, those sorts of threats using generative machine learning models are not really what concerns me, because they're relatively simple to interact with at a kind of institutional level. It's that larger degradation of the information environment where just random people on the street don't know or believe anything they read or hear anymore, that I think is the really, really pernicious part of this.
Who in the group is an attorney? Who in this group is an attorney? Anybody? And I'm asking that because obviously there was a ruling recently, and a good friend of mine has written 5 comic books that have been illustrated by Midjourney. He's written the comic books, but the illustrations have all been done with Midjourney or DALL-E or AI generated artwork, which is pretty incredible stuff. But the thing that I think we're not talking about, and it kind of speaks to what Jonathan and Jim were just saying, is all the base, correct me if I'm wrong, and this is more to Daniel, all the base concepts, the ideas that, whether it's Chat GPT or any other, is feeding off of, is somebody's IP. It's somebody's property. It came from somewhere. This stuff isn't just made up out of thin air. It's sourcing pieces from somewhere to create what it is. And there was a ruling that recently came back from the trademark office that Disney was very happy about, that you cannot trademark a digitally generated piece of art, an AI generated piece of art, to which I know a lot of artists who are angry about that ruling because they think that it should be protected. But there has to be some kind of source file. So when I think about what our mission is based on the earlier discussions that we had, what's being done by a collective group that's been in media, marketing, entertainment, all these things, to essentially say, great, hey, Chat GPT, you can write till your heart's content. But where was the original kernel of that idea sourced from? What did you read on the internet that was written over the last 30 years that allowed you to come up with that original piece of creative?
And what was the copyright? What was the copyright on that piece of content?
Correct.
I mean, this is happening because ChatGPT can also generate code.
Yes.
And a lot of the code that it generates is based on crawling copyrighted code from GitHub, right? Which belongs to somebody. And it's whether it's code, art, words, like it's all trained. What you're talking about is the training data. What is the copyright of the training data? And they're probably like, this is where the whole fair use for indexing breaks down, right? If you're Google and you're crawling all this stuff in order to help other people find it, there's already, I mean, the generally considered fair use that goes back to the early days of Google, right? But then there's also the, like, even that line sometimes gets blurred when Google redisplays the data and doesn't drive the traffic to the site, blah, blah, blah. That's other fights, right? But what happens when you're now synthesizing content from whole cloth? that's
Right.
that's just based on that as training data, right? So now the art looks kind of like this artist, but they didn't draw it because it's been trained on their art.
Yes.
I mean, huge legal problems for sure.
And also, Kevin and Daniel, look, if I want to have an ad that looks kind of like this ad, but I don't want to pay for the IP that picture came from, I can easily get AI to generate something that feels like that, and I don't have to pay anything except the server costs that it, may have cost to generate it. And that fact is going to be problematic for artists for years. I mean, if you think of what DALL-E was taught on, what the corpus of images that DALL-E 2 is taught on, they're all copyrighted images.
So
None of them is getting any compensation.
Steve's really
Right.
trying here.
Yeah.
We're forcing.
So Connor, I want to bring you into the conversation because you have a interesting dual place in this conversation. Both you're younger than anybody else, and secondly, you're an activist who began as a digital activist and then ended up becoming a physical activist. One of the things I think that is important to talk about is when you were doing digital activism, what did you have to do to get noticed and have impact and get shared and get engaged on TikTok, for example? And were there people that were willing to, I'm trying to get to how AI has the potential to amplify either fake actors or nasty actors faster than your thoughtful conversation. How did it feel to try and break through the noise?
Yeah, I think, can you hear me, by the way? Okay, these headphones are new and are giving me a lot of problems. Yeah, I think I do come at this with a pretty interesting perspective, but I don't necessarily think that, at least throughout the process of engaging with mental health activism, that I was using AI to any sort of advantage, per se. I think I actually tried to avoid technology as much as possible because at the end of the day, what I wanted to do was act in the real world. And it was more so something that because of COVID and things shutting down, events closing, groups not meeting anymore, it was more of a necessity that I would have to do things online by writing freelance journalism, by writing things to local government and then giving press releases about it. Like, I don't necessarily think that AI amplified me. I think it's more so something that just happened naturally. But I mean, I guess I would also have the same question. And would they be pushing out the right kinds of activism? Or would it just make everything more of the same, per se?
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
It seems to me that I know you keep wanting to pull this discussion into the political realm, and some of us think that sustainable media also means how do artists sustain themselves in a long time in a world of AI trying to take over everything. But the one application to politics I think is really critical, which is this notion that Steve Bannon had. He said, the Democrats don't matter. The real opposition is the media. And the way to deal with the media is to flood the zone with shit. So what AI does is drop the cost of flooding the zone with shit to zero. I can tell my AI, give me 5,000 Twitter posts on this stupid subject that's a complete lie, and I can just pour it out. And the whole point Bannon was making is, if you throw enough shit out there, people will just be confused and they won't know what to believe. It's what you were saying earlier, Daniel.
Yeah, I completely agree, except I guess I'd argue that the reason it doesn't specifically concern me is because the cost of flooding the zone with shit has not been very high for a long time. And so to me, it feels like a somewhat incremental change to just be able to generate these articles with like a little bit more ease. I mean, I can tell you, we were generating thousands of tweets as a research project, in 2011. So that was quite a long time
but
ago.
at least the guy who runs the Wagner Group had to hire 50 guys in his
But
troll.
and I'll tell you, he's still gonna hire a bunch of people. Like, they're still going to do it because and whether you can do it on ChatGPT or not, like that hiring a bunch of guys, in Bulgaria to write this stuff is not, or now it's, in various parts of Africa, like, is not expensive for him already. And so I don't, that's why I'm saying, like, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that the zone flooding has not been that expensive to date. And so making it incrementally easier with ChatGPT it just continues us down the road, that we're already on.
Let Matt pick up where he got cut off by the internet.
Yeah, well, so yeah, I seem to have a Zoom bug on my laptop.
You have a bad internet connection too.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody doesn't want to let us hear what he wants to say.
Please
Can we go
shut
back to
down.
the IP issue? Because I sort of feel like everything is a derivative of everything else. And it's very unusual for, like, you got to be a great artist to create something truly unique. And if you think of like Cézanne and Picasso and Degas, like they all were sort of copying and having this dialogue of one another, but they didn't like say, well, Cézanne didn't say to Degas, well, you copied my IP and therefore I need. So I sort of feel like there's a lot of art out there that is crap, that's a derivative of something else that's being put out in the world. And so I still think to create something truly unique is, for at least at this moment in time, that has a protected IP is not the realm of the chatbot yet. I mean, maybe it will get there.
I don't think it will, and I completely agree. And it kind of, Jim, to your point earlier about, these things are, there's the huge difference. I mean, I remember back to, you can probably tell from the things in my room here, like I'm a musician on this side. I remember early days of my musical training, like asking my teacher, why do I need to learn all this music theory and stuff like that? And she explained, like, when you break the rules as an artist, you do it with intent. And that, and I think that's the big difference between, something random that ChatGPT comes up with that seems creative, but is at the end of the day a random perturbation in a statistical model, and something that, that Picasso did, which had intent. And I think that's a big difference. There is a place for random perturbations in statistical models. And actually, technologically speaking, one of the areas that generative AI or generative machine learning is having a huge impact is in predicting of protein folding. That Google's machine learning based protein folding models, which are using that effect that you mentioned, Jim, where they come up with different things that humans wouldn't have thought of, different conformations of amino acids, is turning out to be able to predict protein folding better than everything that came before it. And I think that's a positive example, but I think it's important to be honest about what it is that it's doing.
Again, I don't know, Steve, if we're getting off track, but this stuff is just so fascinating. I think it will loop back into the politics discussion. But I remember being a kid and my mom taking me to the Museum of Modern Art and saying we could do that. And then this relates to your comment about intent and training and breaking the rules and knowing why.
Exactly. Exactly.
I do believe that we are so used to the mental model of what talent is, what creativity is, and it is designed in a way to protect the reputation and value in the marketplace, not just of artists, but this is true in every field, the obscurantism throughout history of the law and politics and literature and so forth. The idea that there's a amount of the whole educational paradigm of how many years of study for non-science fields that you have to achieve to make it not easy. So when you have your degree, it's worth something. I think there's so much already built into the insecurity of the human around human talent, the economics of maintaining the quote unquote guild to not let new entrants come in, that when you look in the modern, the contemporary world, where more than in any time in history for the last few decades, the consumer is in control. The consumer is less interested in the process that the Marvel film was created, as long as it, and it will be very soon less interested in the what musical training went into the band that created the new hit that may be original, actually, not formulaic, but is that good that they can't get it out of their head and they love it. We're already long past that period where the consumer's in control. I'm not saying I feel good about this, but I do think we have to understand that for so long, there have been underlying reasons that are beyond our elevation of human creativity that have protected the idea of effort, intention, genius, hard work, credentialism, and so forth. And in a world where incredible quality will be able to be generated really easily for the consumer, which is all of us, and I include consumer, I mean for purposes to use for our other work creatively, that I don't know how we're going to adjust, but it seems to me an earthquake, rejiggering the reasoning that we have to understand and defend creative content.
Okay,
right,
so
let me
be
hold
like-
on one second. We have at least 3 professors on this call who have students in classrooms today, and we have at least 2 students on this call who are in classrooms. And Stephen Strauss, you've been writing extensively about this kind of the earthquake in education about ChatGPT. I'm curious, does anyone want to take a side about whether or not schools should either ban or accept or modify the way students work? And, you know, Connor, I mean, obviously, I assume your professors are saying something to you about your work and how they want to have stuff flagged. Steve, start with you. What? You're muted. Steve, you're muted. Nope,
okay.
Don't.
Couple of caveats. I'm speaking only for myself, not Princeton University. And I'm also speaking from the perspective of someone who teaches graduate students at a professional school of public policy. And so far, I don't think ChatGPT is going to be that much of a revolution or earthquake in my teaching. The policy I've articulated for my students is they are welcome to use ChatGPT or any of the other AI tools that are out there. I am requesting on their honor that if they do so, they show me the prompts and they show me the original results. But there are a couple of things about ChatGPT that make it unlikely to impact the sort of things I teach. I teach a lot of cases where people are given a specific problem that relates to a real world event. One of the cases I teach this semester involves an employee of the TSA who is not performing well. And what do? Do you fire the person? Do you not fire the person? So to answer the question, you need to apply theoretical readings and a case reading. And as far as I can tell, ChatGPT has no access to these because they're actually, behind paywalls. ChatGPT is not very good at applying specific things. And ChatGPT hallucinates. If it doesn't know the answer, it starts making things up. And what it makes up is plausible. As Barrett, I'll put a link here to something I did on this, and I'll be showing this to my students just as a little warning to them. I asked ChatGPT to find me 5 reference. Actually, apologies, I was using a different AI, but I got the same analogous results as ChatGPT. I asked for 5 references about SBIR in economic development. SBIR is a real government program. For our purposes, you don't need to know what it is. And indeed, there are things out there on economic development. However, both ChatGPT and every other AI I tried it with made up their own readings. So it provided a very plausible looking list, I mean, look, I know this field, and I looked at these things and at first thought, wow, these are really interesting things. And then I tried finding them and I realized the little sucker had made them all up. So for what I teach, it'll be, ask me again at the end of the semester, but for the moment, I think it'll be interesting. There's a gentleman at Wharton, Ethan Molick, who's done a short paper about ways to work with ChatGPT in the classroom. I don't think it's going to be that big an impact. Now I'll just speculate for a moment for some of my colleagues who are might be teaching undergraduates. If you're teaching microeconomic theory, well, microeconomic theory is a pretty well-defined topic. Even if the ChatGPT doesn't have access to the exact textbook, if you ask it about marginal cost, marginal revenues, and all that sort of stuff, it will probably give you pretty good answers. I think the trick for the professors there is going to be asking fewer questions that are about definitions and more questions that are about, now, how do you apply this to this problem that I'm describing to you?
Steve, do you think you'll have to go back to oral exams?
Well, I typically give people, again, I'm teaching a graduate program. Typically, everything that students get from me, the written assignments, are essays and a final paper. And again, the types of questions I ask for the essay and for the final paper, at least from what I've seen, and I have been experimenting with ChatGPT and the others, it doesn't seem very good at producing high quality papers. You know, I have specifications, this thing needs formats, I need to be able to check your references. And at this iteration, the fact that it just makes stuff up, I think will blow up badly in students' faces unless they actually pay a lot of attention to it. By the way, from my point of view, if ChatGPT produces an answer to a question I've asked, and the students know enough to be able to edit out what was bad and edit it into something better, I still think that's a learning experience for them. By the way, Daniel, I'd be curious for your thoughts on this. You know far more about it than I do.
I 100% agree, and I also teach in a graduate program. Steve's taken my class, and I said to them at the first class last week, like, feel free to try to use ChatGPT because I'll know and it'll be wrong for the same reasons. But I agree, like undergrad might be harder. Like the more you get into common knowledge, then obviously the more likely the answers will be indistinguishable. There are also, I'll drop in the chat here, emerging tools for detecting whether something has been written by ChatGPT, and the folks at OpenAI are like at least making noises about putting in like word-based watermarks and tools out there to detect, but it will always be a sort of bit of a cat and mouse game. Again, as someone who teaches like a very niche subject on disinformation and narrative warfare to a bunch of graduate, global affairs students, I'm not particularly worried about it, but you're right, like an undergraduate Shakespeare class, I might be worried about it.
So Daniel, do you think an 8th grade history course, someone could take it and never read a book and just use the ChatGPT to write his papers?
Potentially. I have not experimented with it to give you like a definitive answer to that exact question, but probably, my guess would be probably like it would be not that different from like using Google alongside your homework. The only thing I would say, I think it's not that different, right? The only thing I'd say it's riskier because Google is curated to give you more authoritative answers. Same with like Wikipedia, there are people editing that. I tell my students Wikipedia is not a source, but we all start there anyway. So I don't think it's that different. I think it's riskier in that like you don't know when it's wrong, which is the big thing. And so you run the risk of getting caught, in a way you wouldn't as much if you relied on Wikipedia to do your homework if you're an 8th grade history class.
Frank, where are you on this?
Mute.
You're muted.
I'm not sure yet. My classes are not of the sort that they're gonna run into these issues.
My son, who's a computer science major, said he's learned more from ChatGPT than his professor this semester, and it's helped him learn where his bugs are and how to debug things. And So he's using it to learn. He's not using it to replace doing the work.
And is he sure that he's learning? Like, this is the thing that I worry about, is that it's authoritatively incorrect.
Well, when it
So
comes to debugging code, I think it's a little different than the humanities, right?
I'm not sure about that, though. I'm not sure about that.
Just to point something out, I was with somebody from Gartner last night, and one of the CIOs of a financial services company said they use GPT to write a hack into their financial platform, and it did, and it wrote
Like
some
write
code
like an exploit
that would exploit a hole in their code, and then he did a test to say, okay, now write something to fix this type of hole, and it wrote the code to fix the kind of hole. So it's kind of interesting, this space that they're getting into now, which to me is, that's where it starts to get scary.
But that's but it's still, I'm telling you, it's still regurgitating open source exploits. And this is the thing about, because that's another field I spent a lot of time in.
Yeah.
And the consensus is that it's just regurgitating what it read on GitHub. And so if they gave it a known exploit, like, hey, this is a out of date version of JavaScript or Java or whatever it is, then yeah, it can regurgitate an exploit code that's living out there in the open source world somewhere. It's just, there's no reason mathematically why the humanities based answer that it's giving about some historical event is any more prone to errors than the technological one about debugging code or writing exploits. Like, the consensus in the exploit development world is the same as in the humanities or the history or economics or whatever, that it generates a lot of code. Sometimes it works, but a lot of times it's bullshit or it's not very impressive, or it's wrong. So I
Laura,
would take it.
Or you work with young writers. Is anyone submitting ChatGPT articles to you? Have you spoken to your writers about where it fits into their creative process?
So all of our reporting, like the majority of it, is based on interviews. So I don't, it's like no one, as far as I know, is trying to. I'd be curious to, take transcripts and feed it in and see if it can write an article. But we haven't yet. We haven't really been thinking about it at the moment.
Connor, have any of your professors said anything about your work and where they want AI to fit into your workflow?
I will say that it's probably different going to one of like the 7 sister schools where the culture around learning is pretty like by the book. Out of the 8 professors I've had so far, only one has mentioned ChatGPT. And I will also say, like, I personally have not tried it, and I haven't seen anyone try it. I think we're all still on the Google and then read the article and figure out, like, teach yourself how to do it from an article. I've never tried Chat, but maybe I will. Maybe I will try it after this and see what it does and compare it with my work. But yeah, I have only had one professor say something.
Where are you? I mean, what grade? Where are you at school? What is your?
I'm a first year at Vassar College, who's probably going to be an economics major. So maybe I will have to do it for marginal cost and marginal revenue.
All right, so we have 10 minutes left. I want to just switch the conversation a little bit. And let me ask it a different way. You're all here for a reason. You all are busy schedules. You all looked at the calendar. You saw the email and said, yeah, I'm going to attend that. I'm going to take an hour on my Monday. So what have we not dug into that you brought with you as either your concern or your optimism or your question? Because this group, there's a lot of intellectual firepower around this table, a lot of experience. So tell someone throw something out that you brought. Dawn.
Steve, can I just say one thing? I know that, we're all talking about, and it's a larger conversation around the potential negative impact of ChatGPT. You all remember the early days of Wikipedia. All anyone ever said was, oh, but they're going to get it wrong and everyone's just going to use Wikipedia and have all the wrong information. Wikipedia is in our world in a particular way. And so to Laura's point about her son, how do you all feel about the positive, or do you feel that there are any positive effects? Is this going to change our thinking and our learning in any way, in a positive way? I understand misinformation and disinformation and all of those things, huge threats, but is there anything positive? Is it going to be able to make us accelerate further and possibly making mistakes or showing us things in a faster way that could get us to a grander knowledge or that kind of thing?
I've used it. I was meeting with a whole lot of academics this week in Qatar, and it was around a subject matter I didn't know very much about. And so I was just going to the meeting and decided to put in all these queries into ChatGPT. And it was kind of pretty extraordinary what it kicked out about these people, about specific subjects related to sort of the deep intellectual narrative of their work. Where it stopped was also where are their closed databases. So if I asked it to give me 10 citations of what this professor has written or this dean has written, it said, I don't have access to that. So I think it's also kind of interesting that it knows where it's blocked, kind of.
Interesting. I find that fascinating.
And by the way, if you were paying a fee for that service, that fee can include a license to the database. I mean, that's, Stephen, when you were talking about it not being able to access cases, that just seems like a business problem for the owner of the, that seems solvable and likely. I did the same thing. I wanted some financial tracks of a company and how its stock price had changed over time. And I got pushback saying it didn't have access to that data, but that's going to change tomorrow. Someone's just got to swipe a credit card.
I think it's kind of interesting to think about where both negative and positive, where it'll be in 10 years from now. Because every technology has a pro and a con, no matter what, right? And you could definitely play that out. So I think that's an interesting kind of conversation.
Okay, so my question is, if I take Jim Clark's kind of optimistic view of this, then it does seem to me that the employment situation 10 to 15 years from now is pretty desperate. I mean, I don't understand how if these AI technologies can replace, law clerks, radiologists, coders. I mean, there was a piece yesterday in the paper where, now they're turning it to code and doing, will the AI do all the coding? And coding is supposedly being pitched to my grandchildren as the one safe job that there will be in 10 years. And if that's going to be taken away, I don't understand how, save some kind of universal basic income, how we don't have a social revolution in 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, by the way, I would never associate saying the word earthquake with optimism. I think that what we're having is potentially the equivalent of, a massive forest fire that may cause a rebirth and regeneration of something entirely new, the way can happen at times with destruction, but it may be too across the board and too quick. In 2015, I held the first World Summit on Technological Unemployment. And from 2018 to 2020, I was the co-head of the International Congress on the Governance of AI. And we looked at a lot of these issues. And to use a technical term, I mean, we were scared shitless. I wouldn't say there was a lot of optimism there. What I would say is that the Daniel's point, to me, the thing that, and Daniel, I think you keep bringing this up, this post-truth world. I think that there are fundamentals that society and transactions amongst people in a civilization require truth. And require, let's say, credibility, which is an offshoot of truth. Right now, we're in a transitional period where the way that we understand and arrive at truth is being dissolved with incredible acidic force across all levels of society and the structures of society, including all the economic structures that we're so used to that we think that's just the way a civilization is structured. that there will be something that comes out of this on the other end, because we may be in a post-truth moment, but we're not in a post-desire for credibility requirement. So there will be solutions that will emerge out of this chaos, but it is going to be incredible chaos. And I would say it's not optimism. If anything, the optimism would be that human civilization has been very messed up in many ways, related to information, concentration of power, manipulation of perspective for a long time, again, embedded so deeply into our system that it's hard to differentiate it from the way things are. This could dissolve some of that as well, and offer a rare moment in human history for the rethinking of how we arrive at truth, how we engage with each other in matters of trust, and then how we make decisions and then take action across the board. That's an earthquake. It may be, some good may come of this, maybe massive good, because what we've had before this earthquake is not as good as we think.
So here's what's fascinating about this and why I enjoy this group so much. You know, the conversation goes where people's minds are. And, you know, this is not a talk show. We're not booked as guests. But I want to just do one more thing, because we haven't talked at all about marketing or advertising. And Melissa, you know, this is where, you know, both as a parent and then as a professional, like, how does this space feel to you in terms of what marketers are going to come to you and ask for? Are they going to ask for AI-driven messaging campaigns that have 10,000 different versions that they can put out to target directly? What's the coming AI avalanche in your space?
I would say that advertisers are slow to change. They're still working with agencies. You know, I mean, I think in many ways they're just slow to transform through technology. So I don't think we're going to see that right away.
And in terms of your teenage children?
In terms of my teenage children, well, I was sitting here imagining that my son Kyle is not going to be writing any of his own papers in college. So, yes, I think it's going to have a huge impact on our kids starting yesterday.
All right, so we are out of time. Lightning round. I'm just going to ask all of you one word. Describe AI and the future of content in one word.
Hallucination.
Lack of critical thinking. How are we going to teach critical thinking if we're turning to AI to do students' thinking for them? It's like a muscle that has to be exercised.
Suspect.
Evolving.
Where's the humanity?
New tool.
Threatened. I think we're all threatened by it.
FaceTiming with Elmo.
Just interested.
It reminds me of Stephen Glass, the reporter, a super fast Stephen Glass, the fabulist.
Good. Yeah.
Connor, I'm waiting for you.
See, because I'm debating about this, but I think the word I would just say is efficient, because I don't think it's doing what Google isn't. It's just making it easier to get what Google says.
By the way, that little roundabout, by the way, Dave, did you go? Did you have a word?
Who, did you talking to me?
Yeah.
I said FaceTiming with Elmo. It's 3 words.
Oh, okay, got it. So it doesn't count as a word, but we'll give you the extra credit because you put in the effort. All right, everybody, listen. On behalf of all of the members who came, and then the larger group who wants to listen, incredibly interesting. Thank you all. I think here's the most important thing for me. Given your diverse backgrounds and your diverse interests and your diverse experiences, all of you took an hour out of your day to have this conversation. So nobody's saying, oh yeah, that's not interesting, or that's not important, or I'm not going to spend any time thinking about it. And there isn't a consensus, and I think that's healthy.
Right.
Talk to you soon.
Everybody.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Thank you.